this MAGA crowd is really the most extreme political organization that's existed in American history, in recent American history.
The Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
You think about this new Republican Party. This is not your father's Republican Party. These are the MAGA Republicans, the Trump Republicans.
Yet despite those dire warnings, political groups and nonprofits aligned with the Democratic Party spent tens of millions of dollars boosting these MAGA candidates who won their GOP primaries, assuming they would be easier opponents to beat on Election Day. But that strategy could backfire big time, like in New Hampshire, where Republican Don Baldock is neck and neck with Senator Maggie Hassan, a race that could determine control of the Senate. Brett, what say you?
Yeah, I think the Baldock race is really one of the best of that group that is probably going to come down to the wire. New Hampshire, we could have some really late voting there. That's another thing to just take into context today is that we have some states that start counting ballots at 7 a.m. this morning. All
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, yeah. Georgia, Wisconsin. And so if these are tight races, it's going to be probably into tomorrow before we know. But New Hampshire is really one of the best of that group. There's others that are not, that great right now heading into Election Day. Mastriano has a lot to make up, if you believe the polls in Pennsylvania on the governor's race there. But it's pretty ironic if you think about Democrats spending money and then talking about how they're anti-democracy, but they lifted them up. And I think voters, there'll be a backlash in some places for that.
That's right. If something was that existential, if the fight really was for a soul, you would think they wouldn't risk it. But I guess be careful what you wish for, Martha, because when you put your money in a certain direction, then it will likely lead to success. You were making some points earlier that I thought was so wonderful, so informative about that white suburban female vote that has sort of swung 27 points toward the right since the summer. And you were making an analogy with 1996, yet some commonalities that those women feel. Could you explain more about that?
Well, it's very interesting. When you go back to 1996, and I remember the soccer moms of that time, then you also had the security moms post 9/11. So this has always been a really interesting group to watch. But when you go back and look at 1996, the things that were on their minds when all of the exit polls came back in was that they supported President Clinton's desire to crack down on crime, and also a very specific item about wanting more reading tutors, more support for kids in school. So those, I think, will hit home with a lot of folks right now as things that these moms are also very concerned about. I also think that it's not just white suburban moms. I mean, the suburbs are much more diverse than they used to be.
Thank you.
I think there are a lot of people who fall into these categories who are from all different backgrounds,
That's right.
who care about these things. It also touches on younger women who are expressing, there was a very good New York Times piece today that spoke to a lot of women in this category, and they were expressing a desire to be able to buy a home in their own hometown. They can't afford it anymore. And the adjectives that kept coming up were that they were feeling strain economically, strain and then concern, strain and concern. And back in 96, this group of women said they liked President Clinton because he was optimistic about the future. And I think about the message that we've heard from a lot of Democrats, especially in recent days. I think of President Obama talking about, don't mope, right? Yelling at voters, get out there and vote, don't mope. Basically trying to say, get your act together and be positive, but they haven't had that message. And I think that people always sort of gravitate towards a positive message, something that makes the future look a little bit better. We'll see how this bears out tonight when people actually vote, but it's just an interesting thing to keep in mind as we wait for these numbers to come in.
That's right. And on that note of concern and strain, Harris, you mentioned, Pennsylvania is such a crucial state. This is a state where 500,000 of whom are employed by the oil and gas industry. This is a state who, because of new laws, not only did they start counting the polls at 7 a.m., but they will continue counting nonstop until completion. There's a lot at stake, and we have, for example, the Fetterman and Mehmet Oz. One could argue Mehmet Oz was one of a little bit more optimism. It was acknowledging the sort of horrifying crime statistics out of that
He's a
state
former talk show
and
host,
jobs.
so he's good at that.
But he was dedicated to being conciliatory, he said, and the feedback from residents there is that they believe him. that they believe that optimism and that dedication to getting things done while citing the situation that is untenable, frankly, as he argues for Pennsylvanians.
He is used to having audiences of people that he asks questions of and listens to the answers. Mm-hmm. Right, and when you have that in your background, it is kind of like a political campaign. After a while, you see what's on the ground and you address it immediately because it's live in front of you. I don't know what Fetterman's experience is. At the debate, he said he won his mayorship by 1 vote. I mean, I have to guess it's a small town.
It's a small town.
You know, right?
Yeah.
And I would imagine he probably went to that person's home and thanked them personally. I would hope that he would. But the point I'm making here is that there was a lot of misunderstanding around what a bad debate performance could deliver for him. And that's because he's not used to being on the ground with live audiences, answering questions one-on-one. If he were, he wouldn't have said some of the things he said about crime recently, like showing mercy to killers. I want to get back to something you said, though, Martha, because I think it's extremely important. And it has to do with the compartmentalization that we have done, not just as politicians in the nation, but as the electorate, too. We allow ourselves to be put in boxes. It's not just white women who vote a certain way who live in the suburbs. Their black women friends do, too. And that's an interesting point that you made, because I think that the black men in Georgia may not be the only ones who don't vote for Stacey Abrams. Maybe there's some other things that are there. Maybe all people feel unsafe because of crime, But I do think it's interesting, back to the point real quickly, all the money that was spent. How do you feel as a donor, knowing that your money that you gave a party went to paying the candidates in the other party? Right. That your party thought that they could beat, but now they might not. Do you get your money back?
Astronomical figures, $250,000 for 30 seconds. Football games, for example. Kaylee, your Fox Nation midterm show has been fascinating, really amazing these last 2 weeks. You have interviewed so many candidates. What are your thoughts on the field in general and the chances?
Yeah, it was cool because we got to really dig down into the personal life of some of these candidates. And, I just want to address these so-called MAGA extremists. Apparently the crop of candidates is so wild, so out there, they should all be doomed in their fate. Let's talk about their life stories. Some are so-called MAGA, some are not. But nevertheless, they've all been portrayed in that manner by the sitting president and their opponents. Joe O'Dea, great candidate in Colorado. He's someone adopted, raised by a Denver police officer, built a construction company from his basement up. He's in single digits. Alan Fung in Rhode Island, spoke to him last night. Alan Fung, raised by 2 Chinese immigrants, might win a district. Biden carried by 14 points. Republican hasn't won it in 34 years. Cassie Garcia, Monica de la Cruz, Myra Flores, immigrated from Mexico. These women taking over the southern border, who I had the pleasure of going and sitting down with down at the southern border. The list goes on. Juan Ciscomani out in Arizona's 6th, who could win. He immigrated from Mexico at 11 years old. He is the American dream. So call them extremists if you will. I am so proud of this crop of candidates. And if the Republican Party has a good night tonight, it is because of the best of America that stood up, put their family on the lines and said, I'm running. I don't care if I'm demonized. They are America. That is who you're looking at in the GOP.
This is the most diverse that they've ever had.
Yeah,
ever.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
69 diverse backgrounds.
I'm sorry that they feel demonized.
Yeah, a lot of them do.
Yeah. No matter what their politics are, that
they won't feel demonized when they get the vote of the American people.
Well, there you go.
Some of them.
And because many Americans feel demonized, frankly. But to your point about that, perhaps tonight is the generational sea shift. Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.